I remember there was one statement by Prime Minister of Australia that he doesn't want to sit at the same table with the leader of the country that invades other countries. Who does he mean? Biden? Boris Johnson? Mm-hmm. Come on. We all know history, But from my own point of view, if some leaders, and of course they will be not the majority of the leaders of G20, prefer not to come, it's their business. G20 will still be very relevant. And we really appreciate the position of Indonesia that means to focus the agenda of G20 on economic issues. The main thing that we've learned are lessons, and the lessons is that we will never trust our Western partners again.
Halo semuanya, sekarang saya duduk bersama dengan Dubes Rusia untuk Indonesia, Her Excellency Madam Ludmila Vorovьёва. I hope I pronounced your name right.
Absolutely.
Thanks for making the time for us to have this discussion. There are several questions that I would like to have your comment on. Would you like to address any comments regarding the suspension of Russia from the UN Human Rights Council, which the UN General Assembly voted for? Is there any reaction from your government on that, and how?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, this was initiated by the United States, and it's unlawful and politically motivated decision. On the other hand, also, how can it help to solve the Ukrainian crisis? If the motivation behind these decisions is to just punish Russia, then probably it makes sense. But if the motivation is to help resolve the crisis, then it doesn't have any sense, because by pretending that Russia doesn't exist and is not member of this or that international organization, the crisis will not go away and Russia will not vanish from the world map. So, of course, it's unfair, it's politically motivated. Actually, we are appreciative that Indonesia didn't support this decision. Indonesia abstained. Like many countries in the world, practically half of the countries didn't support this decision, either by abstaining, voting against, or not participating in the vote. So all these claims that Russia is being isolated, they're actually not true.
When we're talking about what's happening in Ukraine, I think different perspectives occurs when you see different medias, right? I think some media, especially siding with Ukraine, saying it's an invasion of Ukraine, but if we read the Russian media, it's a liberation of Ukraine. So what do you think about this, difference in perspective, and it really influences how people see this whole thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Words have very important impact on people. As it was written in the Bible, the word came first. Mm-hmm. So it's very important, of course. Of course, it's not a war against Ukrainian people. It's not an invasion. We're not trying to destroy Ukraine, and least of all Ukrainian people. It's a military operation that has very well-defined goals and targets. And unfortunately, the Western media have never reported that there was a war going on in Ukraine for 8 years, and people were dying every day. There was bombing and shelling the peaceful cities of Lugansk and Donetsk by Ukrainian army for 8 years. 14,000 people died. It means every day people were being killed. And where are the reports by the Western media? Where is all this hysterical reaction? It was just ignored by the Western media community. So one of the targets of this military operation is to protect the people of Donetsk and Lugansk. And now it's open information that has been proved and we have documents that Ukrainian side, supported by the West, were planning a massive attack on Lugansk and Donetsk in March, and even maybe on Crimea. So that would have meant a much larger conflict with more victims, and of course it was a direct threat to the security of the Russian Federation and Russian people, both in Russia and Lugansk and Donetsk. So our president has taken this very hard decision to start this military operation before we would have become a target of a big military operation by the Ukrainian armed forces, very much supported by the West.
Madam Ambassador, allow me to start talking, but who the Russians want to liberate the Ukrainians from all these things? Because the word liberation always, always written.
I can tell you from the, I would say, neo-Nazi groups, first of all, and I wouldn't say liberation, I would say protection.
Protection. Okay.
Protection, because people in Lugansk and Donetsk were, as I told you, they've been attacked by the armed forces of Ukraine and neo-Nazi group also, and it is shocking for Russian that Nazi ideology was very much supported by the government of Ukraine. You know, of course, that Nazi ideology is banned in Europe, in the United States, in Russia, of course, and it was openly supported by the government in Ukraine. And the West was turning a blind eye on that for 8 years. The first thing that the government in Ukraine tried to do in 2014, when it came to power after a coup d'etat, was actually to support these neo-Nazi groups and to ban everything Russian, including Russian language. 90% of Ukrainians speak Russian, and 40% of Ukrainians think of themselves as ethnic Russians. How can you do that in a country like Ukraine? So this is absolutely shocking what they are doing now.
The casual observers, when they see and listen the clarification from the Russian government about the presence of the neo-Nazi in the Ukrainians, some of them saying that it's actually who acting as an aggressor is the Russian, and they're trying to liken it to what happened in World War II. And some accuse that it's actually the Russia who are acting like that, not the other way around. What's your take on that?
Again, it's the word, what words you use. But the fact are that, first of all, of course, for an average person, normal person, when you think about military action, when you think about war, it's a tragedy. No one wants war, least of all Russians. We know what war is. Together with Ukrainians, we fought in World War II. We lost 27 million lives, and we know what war is. We don't want it. We don't want to happen. We don't want people to die. But sometimes, in order to prevent a bigger tragedy from happening, you need to take drastic measures, of course. Again, no one was saying anything about the war that was going on for 8 years in Lugansk and Donetsk. No one was showing this alley of angels in Donetsk, where children are buried, which were killed during this war. Or no one is showing in the Western media the image of, we call her the Madonna of Borlovka. It's a photo of a young girl killed by Ukrainian army lying in a pool of blood with her baby in 2014. It was not shown in just a single Western media. So, of course, we needed to stop that finally, because there was no intention from the Ukrainian side to stop that. Actually, we tried to do it with diplomatic means. For 8 years, we've been pushing Kiev to fulfill the Minsk agreements. We were the ones who initiated the Minsk agreements. We tried to and we managed to urge the leaders of Lugansk and Donetsk and the Kiev sit together and find a way, find a solution, and a solution was found. But Kiev did not fulfill their commitments, and they were very much supported again by the United States and their allies.
But by sending the troops, some people said that it's actually the Russians who violated the Minsk agreement.
We were not part of the Minsk agreements.
Oh, okay.
How can we violate them?
Yeah. And one last thing about this, there's a lot of allegations and cries about the allegations of war crimes committed in Ukraine by the Russian troops. Any comment on that, Madam Ambassador?
Absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. I'm Russian, and I was born in Ukraine. I know the feeling that Russians have towards Ukrainians. We don't have any hatred. We don't have any animosity towards Ukraine. We do understand that, unfortunately, Ukrainians are being used as an instrument, and they've been brainwashed for many years in believing that we're their enemies. On the contrary, actually, our armed forces are trying to spare civilian population. Wherever our armed forces come, they bring humanitarian assistance, they distribute water and food, they open humanitarian passages trying to evacuate a civilian population. Now we have around 1 million refugees we do accept people from Ukraine. And all these fakes distributed in the Western media, they are absolutely terrible. On the contrary, we have facts and documents showing that Ukrainian troops torture and kill prisoners. They kill their own civilian population. They use houses as they put their military equipment in the houses where they are just civilians living. They're using civilians as a life shield. There are some people saying that our operation is going too slow, and that shows that we are failing. It's not true. We're being careful. We could have progressed much quicker, but what we're trying to do is to spare the civilians.
I'm going to touch the topics on the G20 summit this year, because Indonesia are hosting the summit, and of course, one of the problems right now for the international community is about whether President Putin is coming or not to Bali in October. Or is he coming, Madam Ambassador?
I hope so. I can tell you that the invitation has been issued and it was received, and our president has expressed his intent to be present at the G20 summit. My opinion, first of all, that if there are countries that are trying to prevent that from happening and trying to boycott the meeting, actually it's their business. If they don't come, it's then I think it's quite cowardly position. Okay, you try to pretend that Russia doesn't exist. Russia exists, and whatever they're trying to pretend is not true. I remember there was one statement by Prime Minister of Australia that he doesn't want to sit at the same table with the leader of the country that invades other countries. Who does he mean? Biden? Boris Johnson? Mm-hmm. Come on, we all know history, So even from my point of view, I'm not expressing the official position of my government, but from my own point of view, if some leaders, and of course they will be not the majority of the leaders of G20, prefer not to come, it's their business. G20 will still be very relevant. And we really appreciate the position of Indonesia that means to focus the agenda of G20 on economic issues, and they are very important, of course. We support the priorities of G20 presidency, It's the recovery of the economy after COVID pandemic. It's the strengthening of the healthcare system. It's the digital transformation. It's the energy transformation. These are issues that are very important. And G20 is not the forum to discuss political crisis. It's the forum that should concentrate on global financial and economic problems that are very numerous.
On the G20 thing, I think we, the Indonesian people, are leaving it to the government to decide, but I think we're not very keen on being told what to do, right, by other countries.
Absolutely.
So I think we understand that position as well. Your foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov, met with our foreign minister in China.
True.
Is there any advancement between our countries since that meeting, and what's the outcome from that meeting? Can you share with us?
I think many issues have been discussed during this meeting, bilateral issues, G20, of course, and I think positions have been stated from both sides. The meeting was quite recent, so I would say that there are any new developments.
Regarding in the information war and campaign, there's also a lot of allegations against the Russians, right?
Absolutely.
I think there's an allegation that the Russian government are running digital campaigns on various countries, including Indonesia. That's why there's a lot of, sympathies from Indonesian people towards Russia. Is that true that the Russian government have this orchestrated digital information campaign all across the world?
What do you mean, a digital campaign? If you mean cyber attacks, it's not true. Again,
no, it's not cyber attacks,
evidence.
but to create positive sentiments in the local internet. That's why if we're looking at Indonesian TikToks, there's a lot of kids saying "ura." There's kids saying they like the Russians. Is that something created or designed?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What we're trying to do is we are telling the truth, actually, and we're trying to explain our position. If it's well met in Indonesia and many other countries in the world, actually, it's not that we are trying to orchestrate something. It's just, I think, very normal feelings of people who understand the real root of this conflict.
What do you want to see more from the Indonesian government in addition to what has been done so far, to help resolve these things in Ukraine? Is there anything more that we can do as a
Just
government?
not to give in to the Western pressure. To be impartial, for the G20 to just concentrate on the agenda that has been already agreed upon, and not to give in to this terrible pressure that has been applied not only to Indonesia but to many countries in the world. We do appreciate the free and active foreign policy of Indonesia.
Where do Russia see themselves in the map of global power these days? Because from the way I see it, it's about Russia want to be like the leader of the rest against the Western hegemony. Is that true, Madam Ambassador?
No, I wouldn't put it that way. It's not about leadership against Western hegemony. It's just opposing Western hegemony. We don't agree that just a small group of countries have the right to dictate their will to the whole world. And we don't agree that these countries are using economy, information, military power as an instrument of attacking other countries. We are not the only country that have been targeted by the West. Everyone remembers Yugoslavia in 1999. Everyone remembers Iraq, Libya, Syria, or Afghanistan. Actually, we don't agree with the world order that allows things like that to happen. That's why we don't agree with the concept of the rules-based world order promoted by the West, because the problem with this concept is that the rules are written in Washington and Brussels, and other countries don't have any part in that. the rules are not written by China or Russia or by Indonesia. It's written by Washington and Brussels. Why do we have to follow these rules? And we already have a set of rules. It's international law, it's UN Charter, but we see how international law and UN Charter are being ignored by the West. And it didn't happen in February, it happened a long time ago.
Still, in regard to the information and PR scope, Madam Ambassador, I think the president of Ukraine has been engaging in several PR campaigns. I think the latest one is being shown with the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson walking around in Kiev, while some people said that President Putin in Moscow not doing anything publicly. Is that the style that the Russian government is doing? That's the way the Russian does their diplomacy behind the closed door, so people don't see that? Or do you not think that it's necessary to engage in a PR campaign to gain sympathies from the international community?
Well, it's even I even cannot compare the two styles, because President Zelensky, his background, he's what do you suggest, that President Putin invite Boris Johnson to Moscow and walks around the streets of Moscow? That our president has engaged in a lot of meetings and conversations with Western leaders. I think even today he's meeting with the Chancellor of Austria. And it is well known. But of course, as the Western media are in the hands of the Western governments, it's not being shown. I think even if you walked in the streets of Moscow with the Chancellor, it wouldn't have meant anything. This kind of PR campaigns, I don't know how really effective they are. It's not about walking in the streets. It's about what the substance of these meetings are. Yeah. So I wouldn't even try to compare these two styles.
I think what I'm trying to say is, some countries that they try to portray their countries as benevolent, as good. I think some countries in the Middle East, for instance, they're trying to reestablish a new portrait of their countries. But I don't think that the Russian government and Russia as a country really cares about what the other countries think of them, as long as it suits your national interests.
Interesting question. What we care about, it's not the image that is being produced of Russia in Western media, because what we already see for more than a decade, it's always bad. Anything bad happens in the world, Russia is behind. It's not what we really care about. It's of course we would like to reach to the public of countries, but the Western world is not the whole world. Basically, there are many countries that we see don't have this Russophobic policies, and what we care about is having good relations with other countries. We are open for dialogue and cooperation in the interest of the people of our countries. Of course, we do understand that the public has influence on the governments, of course, and that's why we're trying to explain the reasons and the motivation against this, beside this military operation that we're conducting in Ukraine. But I'm sure that at the end, people do understand what is really happening.
One final question from Madam Ambassador. After all these things ended, and hopefully it's going to end soon, where do you see the position of Russia, globally, with the prediction of the economy of Russia going to plunge, I think, by 11%. And of course, about the condemnation from the other countries. Is Russia going to be a pariah, you think, in the international community?
Absolutely not. Well, what do you mean by international community?
Like the UN, for instance.
No, of course
and
not.
trade or not?
No, if you mean just, European Union and the United States, well, but they're not the whole world. We have China as our strategic partner. We have very good relations with ASEAN countries, including Indonesia. We have good relations with Latin American, African countries, with Middle Eastern countries, and I hope more and more countries will understand what we are doing. But the main thing that we've learned are lessons, and the lessons is that we will never trust our Western partners again. We will rely more on ourselves, on our own potential. And Russia has a great potential. We are very rich in natural resources. We have a developed agriculture, which is actually the result of the sanctions that have been imposed in 2014. Because before 2014, we were very much dependent on food imports from abroad, not anymore. On the contrary, we became #1 wheat exporter, together with Ukraine, actually. We export beef, we export chicken, so no more dependent on foreign partners on that. So how can you trust people who, they say they freeze your central bank assets, but in fact it's stealing central bank assets? How can you believe partners that, okay, central bank assets are government assets, but why they are stealing property of private property of Russian nationals? Why is that? Where is the legal basis? How can that be? It's absolutely illegitimate. So we don't have trust anymore. We will be more self-reliant. We will be more self-sufficient, and of course, I'm sure we will be more looking towards Asia-Pacific region.
You mentioned one interesting thing, that your lesson is not to trust the Western partners. Are you in a position to actively encouraging other countries to do the same?
I think, we're not encouraging anyone, but, you just look at what is happening. I think it is evident. How can you trust people who just, and we are not the only country in this position. Have ever Western countries returned something they've taken? No. Iran, Afghanistan, Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, they just seized these assets and they will never be seen again. And in plain words, it's just theft, of course. So I think other countries should look at this situation and make their own conclusions.
Madam Ambassador, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Enlightening discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much.